Welcome to the IT Coach for Small Business podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Swan. With me today, my guest is Fred Cobb. Fred is the Executive Vice President of Services at InfoSystems and our Chief Information Security Officer. So welcome, Fred. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Aaron. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah.
I really appreciate taking a few minutes to speak with you.
It's our pleasure to have you here. Today, we're going to focus on that second role that I mentioned, the Chief Information Security Officer, or I think we abbreviate it CISO a lot of the time. You serve as InfoSystems' actual Chief Information Security Officer, but we also, InfoSystems offers virtual CISO to our customers. So viewers of this podcast are probably familiar with the virtual CIO role that I fulfill for some of our customers, which is essentially outsourced executive leadership. So I'd like, if you would, maybe define for us what a Chief Information Security Officer does. How is that different from a CIO role?
Certainly. And I'll talk about the CISO role for a brief period of time, and then I want to talk about how together the CIO and the CISO really work jointly to get good synergy when everything is working right and both of those roles are being utilized by a customer. But if you want to talk about just the definition of the CISO, think about the Chief Information Security Officer as being focused on really the ever-increasing security concerns that all organizations are faced with. So really, if you look at the CIO setting sort of the business direction, some of the operational strategy, looking at things where, what do we need to do infrastructure-wise on upgrades or cloud versus, remaining, with a physical presence for the hardware, all those things and much more the CIO is focused on and providing that vision for our customers. The CISO is really taking the same level of approach, but the subject matter, again, is security related. Looking at cyber programs that need to be implemented for various customers, looking at compliance needs that, take a healthcare customer as an example. You got HIPAA compliance with the HIPAA security rules, so the CISO may be focused on the compliance and getting things secure in that space, or in the retail space or manufacturing. Regardless really of the industry, there is a need for that, grander vision, thought that goes into really making sure that the environment is secure and not just, turning knobs and flipping switches with technology, but also thinking about the direction that your company needs to go with their security program. It gets into, the training regiment, talking about that. It does get into the cyber spend budget as it relates to the overall operational budget, how much can be carved out that can directly be applied to security efforts. So it has that real strong focus on security-related activities.
Thanks for that. I know we talk internally, and we've been very intentional about the way we've structured things to have the CIO role and the CISO role as separate. Why is that important?
It's important for a few reasons. One of the biggest ones is to get that true segregation of duties so that there's not a conflict. I'm not talking about a personal conflict between individuals in the organization, but when it comes down to the overall aspect of operations, the CIO may be focused on, let's say, a major upgrade or a major spend, and the CISO would complement the CIO by saying, well, let's look at that and let's look at how we can apply good cybersecurity, good cyber, hygiene to what might be being planned by the CIO and the rest of the executive management team for organization. So in a lot of organizations, the CISO, the CISO would report to the CIO, but more and more organizations are trying to get, if you look at the organizational chart, have that sort of a peer relationship between the CIO and the CISO reporting up to either the CTO or even the CEO. By having those separation of duties, it generates more discussion. A lot of times it generates a different take on what we need to do at implementation time or at budget planning time, as I mentioned just a moment ago. So, having two different schools of thought with a similar goal in mind is very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, it comes down to accountability, right? The idea that, sometimes the CIO is out there leading the charge on getting management's vision done. It can be easy to lose
Exactly.
sight of, well, we got to keep this stuff secure. So I think having the vCISO or the CISO as a separate role really helps keep accountability and make sure that you don't run into problems down the road.
Yeah, and for a lot of the organizations, in the SMB, small to medium business space, uh, and this holds true for the CIO role as well, is they don't need, it's not in the budget perhaps to put a full-time CIO, on
Right.
staff when, that fractional amount of time that we spend providing the vision, providing the input, helping with all the planning sessions is the right fit. And that holds true for the CISO role as well. A full-time CISO can be a pretty big expense on many organizations. And some organizations are big enough they can justify having someone
Sure.
doing that full time. But the way we structure it here at InfoSystems for our external customers, excuse me, is that they can have everything from just a couple hours a month to a few hours a month of that truly focused CISO time without the expense of a full-time body. So it's key to point that out.
I think an advantage that we bring to, and we've talked about this for the virtual CIO role, and I think it would hold true for the CISO role as well, is one of the advantages we bring in not being not being just that company's dedicated employee is that we have exposure to lots of different companies. We see the security problems that company A is having down the street. It can help company B not deal with that because we've learned the lesson ahead of time.
No, that's a great point, Aaron. The fact that we're in those different environments on a daily basis. And there's some commonalities, if you take ransomware or other types of nefarious malware, it's really industry agnostic, those types of attacks, but
Right.
there are some things to be particularly aware of in certain industries. And the fact that we play in those different industries and work in those industries and see what other pain points are for other similar customers, the fact that we can bring that value and that vision into an organization, that's a real big plus to have that well-rounded view.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And I hope this has given our viewers a good idea of why these roles are important in your organization. I thought I would, if you're up for it, to take the balance of our time today. Fred has a deep experiences in security. Thought we might take the remainder of our time today and just focus on some just real practical, common security questions that we hear.
Certainly.
So we'll hit you with a few of those. So I want to start with passwords because passwords are something we hear about all the time, and we hear all sorts of advice about them. I'll hear, well, it's got to be 8 characters, it's got to be complex, and you should change it every 90 days. Or it should be 14 characters and complex, but you only have to change it yearly. Or you should use passwords, or, everything in between. So really like to get your viewpoint on that for the average small business. What advice would you give on best practices around passwords?
Yeah, that's a good topic to bring up, Aaron. And it's interesting because having been in this industry for a while, like you have, we've seen the evolution, and there's certainly a changing of the guard, if you will, in the way that passwords are thought of in the security, I guess, realm versus maybe the compliance realm. And I'll get the differentiators out there for that here in just a moment. But one of the issues with complex passwords is, well, number one, they're hard to remember. So you see all the training on, hey, you raise up the laptop and there's a sticky note on the bottom that has
Right.
a password, or people, will put them in other less secure places because of the difficulty. Let's say you're required to have maybe an account policy within your domain environment is you must have 15 characters, you must have a combination of upper lowercase special character number, and they must be rotated every 60 maybe or every 90 days. So what happens when those constraints are placed on a password, sometimes you get to where you're changing one character, or you get to where, again, you're keeping them in an unsecure place because of the difficulty in remembering them. So recently, NIST, I think it's pretty sure it's NIST 863. There is a 63B that came out with some additional guidance. NIST is National Institute of Standards and Technology, where there's tons and tons of documentation out there for all things related to cyber and other things. But a recent publication from NIST has sort of provided guidance on a different approach, saying, because we've built this complexity in passwords or into our thinking around those, we've created an environment where they are less secure. People are taking shortcuts and things. So it's sort of coming around to the idea of, well, let's don't really make passwords that complex. Maybe we use passphrases, create a sentence, maybe by increasing just the length of the characters in the password to a sentence. Like, it could be anything. Like, we're recording a video today. Maybe we do it on a weekly basis. Your password might be specific to this type of meeting. This is a weekly recording, and I know that's very simplistic, but think about how many characters are in that password.
Right.
If someone was using some machine to crunch through, doing brute force attacks on the password, as you add characters, they don't have to be complex characters. They just have to be additional characters. It increases the difficulty in cracking those passwords. Plus, if you're thinking about it in a sentence mode versus some cryptic, hard to remember password, it becomes much easier for the human, to remember what my password is on a sentence, a common thing that may be happening. So that is changing. I'm kind of in the camp of that is a good idea. And also, if you think about, well, this rotational thing, why are we changing them every 90 days just to change them? There's logic that says, if I change it on day one and it's compromised on day two, is it buying me any additional security to say, well, my password, I rotated it 3 months every 90 days, but it was compromised on the second day, and we didn't actually catch that with any other security controls that we might have in place. So the NIST publication goes on to say, maybe we don't think about changing those passwords. Maybe we don't put that in our process until there's a true indicator of compromise. If there's something out there happening that causes an account to be suspect, absolutely rotate those passwords. But to do it for the sake of doing it on a 90-day or 120-day calendar, it's a burden to companies to do that. You can figure out when a password may have been compromised and quickly change that password. In the PCI world, you must rotate passwords every X number of days. In the HIPAA compliance world, you must rotate passwords every so many days. In the FFIEC world for banking, you must rotate password. It's built into the audit
Right.
process of those frameworks, even though it's starting to become more archaic as time goes on, and we rethink that. I know it's a long answer, but I
No, I
wanted to
think that's
provide
good.
some pretty detailed information around that.
I think I think it would come as a great relief to a lot of businesses of being able to make those changes. Passphrases are easy to remember, easier to remember, and the rotation thing. I mean, it's more than just the idea of when you change your password, you forget what you changed it to, and it's difficult to come up with a new one. But I mean, you and I both know when you change your password, even on Windows, and that affects your email, could affect your instant messaging, and all those places have to be changed. And your cell phone, it's going to start prompting you to change it there. So it's an ordeal.
It is an
Um,
ordeal. Yeah.
so customers don't look forward to that.
But
Let's talk.
on that one topic, let me say it really comes down to look, for those out there that are considering a change, or they're questioning, well, is that good advice, that latest NIST publication or these new ideas around it? Really becomes it's a company by company, or the compliance drivers, as I mentioned, that feed into that. So I would consider at least thinking about that if I was working as a CISO in an organization, or had influence over changing account policies, to see what really works, what should we do, and seek that additional guidance as well.
Well, one of the things I think that might influence someone's decision about password policies is what other security mechanisms they have in place. I know one of the things that when you came on at InfoSystems that you quickly brought us around to is the idea of using multi-factor authentication. I know now, I have on my phone a app that handles that. So could you maybe talk a little bit about what is multi-factor authentication, why it's important, how is it helping keep things secure?
Certainly. So, we've been on the topic of passwords for the last couple of minutes. And that's really something, it's something, in fact, there's a synonym really for passwords, and that is a known secret. Sometimes you'll hear the term known secret, which means a password, if you're talking about it in that context, excuse me, where and that's considered, if that's all you have to get into a system, that's considered, single factor. If a username and a password, those are the credentials to get in. If those are compromised, someone can take your username, password, and whatever access that you have, they can exploit that potentially, or use that to even gain more privileged access into an environment that they might be attacking. We see this time and time again with single factor on email accounts, particularly cloud email, where an account may be compromised for a period of weeks or a period of months, and there's no indicator that that's happening until something very nefarious may happen in the organization to show that that password has been compromised. Well, when you add dual factor or multi-factor into the authentication process, so again, passwords are something think about something you have. I have a phone that has a soft token on it. In other words, when I go to log into a system, it prompts me to enter my security code, which that security code happens to be being displayed only on my phone in a soft token type application. Or maybe it's something that is more of a hard token. Maybe I have a key fob in my pocket that has a rotating number on it that rotates every 60 seconds or what have you. So in order to gain access into that system, I must first know my username. Secondly, I must know the password. And the multi-factor kicks in, where I have to have something physical that is providing me an additional code I must key in to gain access into that. Organizations, if they want to do one big thing that can help with security, it is turning on multi-factor authentication throughout the environment, but at least the critical applications such as email and other critical critical applications that you would have. Because think of the extra effort that would have to go into place to be able to intercept phone traffic for a soft token, or to be able to compromise that phone somehow, have a mirror of the phone. I mean, you can see it on the movies with, the Mission Impossible type things. It can be done, but the extraordinary effort that goes into that is insurmountable for the common criminal to try to do that. So it's very easy now. You've got free ways like Google Authenticator. They don't support all applications, but a lot of applications are supported by Google Authenticator, which is a free MFA solution. If you want to take it up a level, we support and recommend Duo. That's another example of an MFA solution that is very cost effective, but can increase your security around authentication, again, on an order of magnitude.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, with the statement that you made, if you do one thing to increase security, this is it. Because I mean, I think you get a tremendous amount of extra security for a minimal investment. Like you said, a lot of the solutions are free now. I know Microsoft builds it into Office 365. They provide a free authenticator app that you can use, and it's really not nearly as much of as a hassle for the users as you might think.
Exactly.
Once they get into it, it dramatically increased security. So I would encourage our viewers and listeners to really strongly consider putting the MFA into place. In addition to the passwords that we talked about, this is something you can really do to strengthen your security.
Even as a consumer, Aaron, think about your online banking application, or if you have a PayPal account, or you have a LinkedIn account, any of those common web-based applications that you might be using. Now it's very easy to go in and configure secondary authentication, which is really what we're talking about here with MFA, where say you log into your online banking website and it calls you back with a security code.
Right.
Well, it's calling you back on a predetermined number, with a security code that's going to expire, very shortly if you don't use it. So again, another form of multi-factor authentication. So the applications are certainly in the business world, but in the consumer world as well.
That's a great point. That's something I practice on all my financial accounts, or anywhere that involves spending money. I've got MFA turned on.
That's a
So
great idea. Yeah.
well, let's kind of wrap up today. I'm going to throw one more question to you, and just kind of a general question. In your experience, what's the single most security-related item the businesses need to give more attention to? They're missing the boat on.
Oh gosh, I could go. If you'd asked me the top 20, maybe that would have been easier for me to answer. I'm trying to pick the most important one. I think one of the biggest ones. It's maybe not, depending on what day it is, maybe not the most important for every company out there that might be listening to this, but we continue to see it certainly on the cyber services team at InfoSystems. You have to have that constant reinforcement of your people as far as being aware of what's happening out there with phishes and other social engineering attacks. We see it each and every day where even companies that have a fairly robust cybersecurity spend, where they're out there buying, good firewalls, they're out there buying good SIM technology, doing things with, other cyber type technologies that you can deploy. But the biggest thing I think companies can do is to continue to try and fix the human. In other words, have regular training on, these are how attacks can get in through email. These are how attacks can get in through phone scams. We see it all the time where we can do root cause analysis on environments when we're called in to help do containment and eradication due to ransomware or other types of cyber attacks. And a lot of times we can get down to patient zero. And what we find out more often than not, patient zero had an email that came in with a link, and it was just too enticing. Maybe it was, hey, click here for your free coupon, or check out these pictures. And it may be from an email account that got spammed, and may come from someone that appears to be known, appears to be legitimate. But fix the human and prepare the human, prepare your employees for taking that extra moment when they get those types of emails to say, is this really something I should be clicking on, this link or opening up this file attachment? I think if you can continue to reinforce the fact that those types of attacks are coming in, businesses from a one-person shop to a Fortune 50 company are constantly being bombarded with these types of attacks. And the due diligence that you need to do is have that training, whether it's quarterly phishing, whether it's quarterly training, annual training with some combination of phishing, simulated phishing, in other words. I think that's goes a long way in helping your organization stay at the ready for those types of attacks.
I'll tell our viewers that Fred and I did not rehearse our answers ahead of time today. I didn't know how he was going to answer that question, but I suspected. And I agree wholeheartedly. I think training your users is just a huge step that business can take. Ultimately, it's an arms race, right? I mean, the bad guys keep getting more clever, the good guys keep getting better protection, but they just keep escalating. And ultimately, you're dealing with artificial intelligence trying to fight off the bad guys. There's nothing that beats real human intelligence to recognize those attacks and be able to stop them. But to do that, they need to be educated. They need to know what to look for and how to respond. So again, we would encourage you to look at ways, and there's some great programs out there to do that. Emphasis can talk to you about that. I know I'll cite one customer in particular. We did some simulated phishing tests as a baseline to see how they started. We found this organization was 29%. 29% of their users fell for a simulated phishing attack, which is when it only takes one to wreak devastation, you've got 29%. We found with just 1 month of training, we'd reduced that number down to 2.5%.
Wow.
And we continue to train them, continue to keep it top of mind. We'll even try to, it's become kind of a joke around the company now that, any email that comes in, they're automatically suspicious of it. And that's the way I want them to be. If there's a link in there, if there's something that's asking them to take some action, you want your users to be thinking about that, your employees to be thinking, is this legitimate? Do I really need to take action on it? So appreciate your answer on that.
Certainly.
Well, thanks, Fred, for spending some time with us today and educating our audience. Any final words that you have for us before we say goodbye?
I would, just to recap, for those of you out there thinking about, a fractional CISO, we would certainly like the opportunity to speak with you about that, or at least explore it, do some digging, do some Googling to see if that might be a good idea for your organization. Again, go back and, think about your password policies. I think we brought up some good points during that discussion about the evolution of, the mindset change, I guess, around password management, and certainly the training piece. We can't stress enough the importance of that. Time and time again, we see that as a way the bad guys got into an organization. So the more you can do around that, the better off you'll be as a company.
Thanks, Fred.
And,
thank you.
I just want to say, Aaron, thank you for having
Sure.
me, and enjoyed the conversation today. Look forward to another discussion soon.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in and listening today, and encourage you to check out our other podcasts. Encourage you to check out Fred Cobb. He has his own podcast on our website, all about security. So if you want even more security details, tune in for that. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.